Hello and welcome back to Bible Wits Bible Corner. Today we are going to be continuing in Joshua chapter 4. I'm going to be reading verses 13 through 18, starting with the English Standard Version. About 40,000 ready for war passed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all of Israel, and they stood in awe of him, just as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests bearing the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priests come up out of the Jordan, and when the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. New Century Version. About 40,000 soldiers prepared for war passed before the Lord as they marched across the river, going toward the plains of Jericho. That day the Lord made Joshua great in the opinion of all the Israelites. They respected Joshua all his life, just as they had respected Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests to bring the ark of the agreement out of the river." So Joshua commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." Then the priests carried the ark of the agreement with the Lord out of the river. As soon as their feet touched dry land, the water began flowing again. The river again overflowed its banks, just as it had before they crossed. Okay, so here the Israelites can see that God is with Joshua just as he was with Moses. So at this point, it looks like they're going to start listening to Joshua just as they had Moses. Now, with that also is going to come sometimes when they're going to argue and they're going to complain, just as they did with Moses. But all that being said, Joshua has found favor in the eyes of the Israelites. Now, something that I find interesting here. Just in the previous 6 verses, we see that Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan River on the dry land before the priests with the Ark of the Covenant are finished crossing over. And that passage also said those stones are still there to this day. Now, that was written quite a ways after, but if that is still true today, if those stones are still there today, again, I said it in my last video, I don't know how strong the currents are on the Jordan River, but if those 12 stones are still at that exact spot, have not been moved, that does show that God is in control. Now, the other thing that I find interesting about this section here is when the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant touched, like the soles of their shoes or sandals or whatever, touched the water, it divided. It stopped flowing. And the ground was dry for the people to cross. Now, as soon as the last of the priests gets on what would be actual dry land, the water starts flowing again. So, just stuff like that, when I read it, I try to picture that in my head, what it would look like. We see rivers with dams being built all the time, stopping water. And yes, there's overflow valves that push water through, so that the river can continue to flow. However, to see water completely stop, the ground is dry, and then to just watch it rush back as if nothing ever happened, that would be a sight to see. In our walks today, what is our Jordan River? What is our Red Sea crossing? Two somewhat strange analogies, but the reason I ask these questions is, what challenges do we face where we feel like we need to walk on dry land, so to speak, before we get to that challenge and face it? So, good question to think about. I hope you find encouragement in this, and I hope you have a wonderful, God-centered day. Bye.